I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Had a frog in my throat there, and was coming in an octave higher. But it's good to be here with you this Thursday. I'm pleased to have my regular friends here, my cousin Burnell Venable Powell, and my neighbor and friend Kamal King, and my kindergarten classmate Brenda Lau Gray, and my neighbor and friend and compatriot Yusuf Mjini. Others may join us as well. Conversations with Al McFarlane. And what I love about today is that as I reflect on this, it's a group of people that have known each other for a very, very long time and who have always, in my recollection, been serious about discussing what the world is, what it means, and what our place in the world is at a given point in time. And I believe that that's how I would describe myself as a kindergartner. It's how I saw and see my cousin, Dean Burnell Venable Powell. It's how I saw and see my classmate, Brenda Lau Gray, and my classmate, Kamal King. And certainly, Yusuf, it defines my relationship with you. We have always engaged in serious conversation, earnest analysis and evaluation of where we are, what the issues are, what things that we can do that will move the people, the community, the culture forward, what things reflect the best of our humanness and the best for humanity that we both see and participate in and help create, that we co-create. And so in that spirit, I am pleased to have this conversation every Thursday. And I want to begin by, again, introducing Dean Burnell Venable Powell as the former Dean of the University of Missouri at Kansas City Law School, and as the former Dean of the University of South Carolina Law School. Kamal King, classmate of mine and Burnell since third grade in Kansas City, Missouri, and former corporate counsel for the Coca-Cola Corporation based in Atlanta. Brenda Lau Gray, classmate with Burnell and me from kindergarten in Kansas City, Missouri, and Yusuf Mjini, communicator extraordinaire, civic leader, and a moral force in our community. So we want to begin this conversation. And Burnell, I want to go to you, kind of like I did last week, I think, asking you what's on your mind right now. What is top of mind as you wake up, as you woke up this morning, looking at the world and where we are? What are your thoughts?
Well, unfortunately, what was at the top of my mind was the situation at Kabul Air Base and that ongoing calamity. Last week, I said that I was worried that the fallout from the way in which that was being handled could end up reverberating through the political process, and that it put the president in a position that he might seriously have to consider stepping aside in order to give Kamala Harris an opportunity to run on her own as vice president. I think that what has transpired in the last week has been a little better. He's certainly not out of the woods on that. In fact, there were two explosions at the airport today. It's believed to have been an attack, and the leading suspects are one of the ISIS spinoffs, a particularly virulent spinoff from ISIS, even to the right of the Taliban. What concerns me is that there might be even more casualties. The information is still coming in, but I think the early reports indicate that maybe at least 4 Marines may have been killed, and that there were a number of other injuries. that's not good. But by the same token, there have been an increasing number of American citizens and allies and friends taken out of Afghanistan by way of the airport, and that's a good thing. And I believe that the faster we can get out of there, the better. But I think that we can't leave with the image that we simply left American citizens and our allies bleeding on the tarmac.
A lot of things to unpack. Kamal, let me go to you. Either build on what Burnell has ventured, or talk about what's top of mind with you today.
Well, I had a discussion with my wife last night that to move away from to try to get away from the Afghanistan situation and to look at other issues. But she insisted that Afghanistan was the most important issue that was facing America at this time. And as Burnell has enunciated, it certainly is top of news in the U.S. right now. I haven't switched over to BBC to see what else is top of news in the United States. That situation in Afghanistan, although better than our exit from Vietnam, is a haunting expression of what happens when you try to nation build. It hasn't gone well for the United States, other than in Israel, but that's a constant battle. I don't see how, in heaven's name, you can get all the Afghans out who want to get out, or who helped us, as long as the situation remains where the Taliban and ISIS and these other groups are still viable. And with regard to getting the Afghans out, I mean, I think that Afghans who didn't help us, they want out. So last year this time we were talking about immigration on the southern border, and now we're talking about bringing in, what they say, 80,000 maybe,
probably 100,000 when it's all said and done.
More than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people who just want out. And on the other side, if I were the Taliban, and I wouldn't let my engineers, my teachers, my top professionals, I wouldn't want them to be leaving.
Well, Taliban 101, as my understanding, Kamal, was anti-engineering, anti-education, anti-modernity, and content with keeping people in a feudal focus and mindset. What they're saying is that Taliban 2.0 is not your father's Taliban, people that are connected to the modern world, to internet, and they're going to see things differently, and you may discover a different dispensation towards women, at least somewhat, under the new Taliban. And what Burnell mentioned is real. That is the sharp and incisive conflict. They've described it on news as a existential animosity between ISIS-K and the Taliban, that the Taliban fear the ISIS groups that stand to the far right of them and who want to, again, use Afghanistan as a launch pad for global jihad. So I don't know.
I'm too old to roll my eyes, but I have to work hard not to. The problem is that the Taliban have already demonstrated that what they do is more significant than what they say. Mm-hmm. And when Kamal referenced the fact that there are a number of people who didn't give direct aid to the U.S. who would like to get out of Afghanistan, that's a signal that there are a lot of people who simply do not trust them. One of the things that they could have done immediately would have been to broadly announce an amnesty and demonstrated that they were locking up any recalcitrant troops under their command who would even look the wrong way at any of the people of Afghanistan. And that signal wasn't given. What we've heard thus far is simply a general statement that, yes, we want Afghans to stay in Afghan and we need them. But that's not the way you send the message.
The Taliban, from what I'm understanding, is a loose confederation of warlords. People who kind of control their territories. So I'm not certain at this stage what they're capable of doing, of even, if they would have issued the statement, what they're capable of enforcing. So it's like I say, it's a mess. We're just going to have to see.
But there is,
go ahead.
There is something that can be done even at this early stage, and that would be for the Taliban basically to do everything that it could to facilitate the leaving of anybody who wants to leave, and at the same time organize the country in such a way that it sends a signal that if you want to come back, you're free to come back. The transition that Vietnam went through was a much more magnanimous transition. And now Vietnam is a country that has established international relations. It is a country where everybody, the Chinese, the US, the European Union, are all vying to have relationships with and to build commerce with and have exchanges with. But they're doing that knowing that Vietnam is in the control of the Vietnamese.
Brenda, what are your thoughts? And then Youssef, you can jump in here as well. Brenda, unmute, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think my concern is the rise of the white supremacists. That's their big thing about refugees. And that's the reason they're fighting and the wall and everything. So if you've got 100,000 refugees coming in from Afghanistan, there is a possibility that could kind of push even more activity, refugee. Let's keep them out. We've got enough. I mean, we do, but we have to remember Ellis Island too. So anyway, that's my thought. I hope it doesn't happen, but that is a concern. And there were 4 Marines that were killed at the airport.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Al, Burnell, Kamal, Brenda.
Good afternoon.
I've got a number of things on my mind. First and foremost, Al, it was 50 years ago when you and I established the Twin City Black Communications Group. I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
Wow.
And the only relationship that I have that is older than ours is the lovely sister that I've been married to for 52 years, Iva Jean Brown, my wife. But I want to give praise. Well, I want to say hola to Carmen Robles, sister who's viewing the broadcast at this time, and a good soldier and a former co-worker. I want to give praise to the Sounds of Blackness, whose music you use each week, either at the front or the rear end of the broadcast, sometimes both. because it takes a few minutes for me to get my feet back on the ground after I hear them do Reparations or Fed Up. And it's no wonder that Gary Dennis Hines, the director of the Sounds of Blackness, is the music director at Progressive Baptist Church, because listening to their music is the trip back to church for real. Three things. One, the Congressional Black Caucus held its anniversary and annual gala dinner. And a mutual friend of ours, Askia Muhammad, who used to be Charles 37X when he was the editor of Muhammad Speaks, in covering the Black Caucus Gala, once said that the only thing shinier than the streets of Washington, D.C. were the hairdos of the staff and guests who attended the gala. And there appears to be some drama within the Congressional Black Caucus, which is not representative of every Black member in Congress, by a younger group of Black congressional members versus the older group in terms of the future direction. And it's very interesting watching this play out, because it's a polite power struggle. The Black Caucus has been criticized on a number of occasions for giving an inch and not gaining a mile. And the younger group, I think, is more progressive and has some valid considerations that need to be put on the table and taken into consideration. Two other things I want to share. One, it's noteworthy, Lonnie Bunch, who was the original founding director of the National African American Museum of History on the Mall in Washington, D.C., has created a 2-year initiative. He got a $25 million grant. Fundraising has always been one of his strengths. And it's called a racial justice initiative by the name of Our Shared Future, Reckoning with Our Racial Past. And it will begin with a live stream program this evening from Los Angeles. The primary focus of the effort, which is going to travel around the country, is to encourage people who have been unable or unwilling to engage in the conversation on race to do so, and to provide the tools and a safe environment and a healthy environment for discussions of our racial past, which is considered by many to be the original sin of the establishment of the United States. Secondly, there is a group that are known as the Black Music Action Coalition, and they recently issued a 37-page report examining whether or not powerful record and media companies have in effect lived up to some of the pledges and the brave promises for massive change that they made in the wake of George Floyd's murder, about 15 months ago. And Sony and Warner Music each pledged $100 million. Universal pledged $25 million, and only a very small, meager portion of those pledges has been paid out so far. And in the report, which is a coalition, which is led by a coalition of artists, managers, lawyers, and others in the music business, they have called for greater representation by people of color in all aspects of the music industry, from production to streaming to artists, etc. So you've got the Smithsonian moving on the race issue. You've got a coalition of Black people in the music industry pushing the music industry. And I think we have the wind at our backs, so to speak, in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. And it's a bit unfair to look at it in that respect, because it doesn't entitle us to anything except the opportunity to work harder to realize the goals and the needs and aspirations of the African American community. So these are two examples of people, the children of George Floyd and Emmett Till and Eric Garner and Philando Castile and Breonna Taylor and others who have suffered needlessly in our quest for dignity and humanity and liberation, to go forward, to hold the powers that be accountable, and to help liberate the minds of Black people. So there is good news amid some of the chaos and the turmoil and the violence that is visited upon our community almost daily. But it's a pleasure to, the old folks used to say, nice to meet you, nice to be met too. And it's always a pleasure to be invited to participate in the conversation with such esteemed individuals as yourselves. So thank you and good afternoon again.
Well,
that's the example that that's the perfect example. I know Afghanistan is top of mind in the news, but I'm still concerned about brothers killing brothers.
Yeah.
That's happening here in Atlanta, and I'm sure around the country. And then I'm concerned about that, and then I'm concerned about the cleanliness of our community. I live in a Black community like you and Yusef do, I don't want to leave my community. I really don't. But once I get inside my gates, I have gates in front of my house. Once I get inside my gates, I'm real happy. It's beautiful. But once I'm outside the damn gates, I got to look at trash, and so those are the type of things that are top of mind for me. Afghanistan, I feel like it's gonna work itself out.
Why did Carolyn say Afghanistan was the number one issue for a discussion? I'm curious.
Because she watches CNN constantly.
Well,
MSNBC.
No, I think Carolyn has said that because we know who the brilliant person is in that family. but what I would also say is that Tip O'Neill was right. All politics is ultimately local, and there are always big things that are going on that flood the 24-hour news cycle, and those things take up a lot of oxygen. But ultimately, what we are doing day to day and who we are interacting with day to day is going to make a big difference.
I want to offer a shout out to the very Black woman who is now the head of the MSNBC network, and there have been a 600-fold increase in the Black faces, the Black anchors, and the representation and the opinions of people on that network in the past 2 years. And I think it's worth and deserving of our support and our viewing to hear what many of their people have to say about issues affecting our community, because they've really made the most noticeable improvement in terms of on-air talent and in terms of content around the issues that they've been covering. They're doing an outstanding job. And short of watching the Black Channel or the Griot or one of those Black-owned and operated cable television vehicles, I think MSNBC is doing an outstanding job. And YouTube as well, because you can go to YouTube and hear John Henrik Clark, Yosef Ben-Jochanan, Nellie Stone Johnson. I mean, the list of African-American historians, business people, educators, cultural workers on YouTube is phenomenal. And, barring the kind of social media censorship that we run into every time we mention race or, progressive issues. So YouTube is just outstanding. You put a name in their search engine and you get 50 different video responses. You can binge all weekend on Black historians or Black activists or Black theater people or Black educators or Black business people. It's almost bizarre, but it sure is.
You can create your own curriculum.
Absolutely.
Your own study course. And that's why I mentioned this before. I have this merchandise for this group called Narrative. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's Narrative with a K. And there's a website called narrative.com, and it's presenting discussions like this between Dr. Karen Hunter and Dr.
Greg Carr.
Greg Carr.
Mhm.
And phenomenal every Saturday. And they've created an audience of hundreds of thousands. They've announced that their program is probably the largest classroom on the planet now. And it's a classroom dedicated to the examination of lives, stories, narratives, possibilities of Afrocentric perspectives.
How many of you are familiar with Gerald Horne? Horne. He's a
I know
black
the name, but I'm
historian.
not sure why.
I'm sorry.
Did I know the name, but I'm not sure why.
He's written about 50 books, okay, and he's out of university in Houston. And this brother is Joseph Benjo Cannon, John Henrik Clark, Francis Cress Welsing, and Amir Baraka rolled into one. He's
Wow.
bad.
Wow. That's saying a lot. That's a mouthful.
He's bad.
That's a lot.
He's bad. Okay. And you can go to YouTube and enter his name in the search, Gerald Horne, Horne. And he's got a half dozen video lectures. Also, he was interviewed some years back on a program called In Depth, which is on C-SPAN 2. When it becomes book TV on the weekend. And he was interviewed for 3 hours. And he spanked the interviewer, pulled off his pants without even unbuckling his belt or untying his shoes. I mean, he is incredible. Okay. So there's a 3-hour video of him being interviewed in depth. And then a number of other interviews, but on slavery, on the Constitution, on the establishment of the United States, on the Haitian Revolution. I mean, this brother is a monster across the spectrum. Okay. From prior, Dr. Ben focused on African civilization. John Henrik Clark focused on the context of African liberation within the current diaspora. And this brother encompasses both. He's a historian, but he is one of our greatest critical thinkers at this point in time in history. And I would recommend just to listen. Like I said, my problem is he's got 50 books, okay, and I can't afford but maybe 4 or 5. Is trying to figure out which 4 or 5 I want, because I've heard his lectures and he's tough across the board, okay. And there's interesting lectures by Tony Martin on Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Tony wrote the book, The Organizational and Ideological Struggles of Marcus Garvey and the UNIA. He's on YouTube. I mean, there's so much out there, but Gerald Horne has got a whole horizontal list of interviews and videos where they've interviewed and captured him. And he's brutally honest, no nonsense. And what I like about people like him is their ability, like Tim Tyson, like Eddie Glaude, who wrote the book Begin Again on James Baldwin. Absolutely incredible. It's their ability to communicate across generations. And when I was on the radio, I used to imagine people listening in their car, and there would be an adult husband and wife in the front seat. In the back seat, there would be a grandfather, and then there would be 2 grandkids. So the question is, how do you deliver the information in a manner that people across generations, whether they have a GED or no D, whether they come from Morehouse or no house, can understand what you're talking about? And that's what I love about Brother Al McFarlane, because that's what he does in print, that's what he does in person, and that's what this broadcast does, to break information down and make it available so that people can bless it by the use they put it to, and not try to impress or talk about people's heads or flash credentials. And Burnell got enough credentials to load a briefcase, and he doesn't reflect that, when he's communicating. Brenda, can talk with lawyers, with PhDs, and with welfare moms in the project. And Brother Kamal, I appreciate you more every week. But, communication is supposed to be, the transfer of information in 2 directions. Okay. And so these folks that I've just illustrated are people who listen, who share, and who communicate out of love for Black people. So by all means, check them out.
Brunel, I want to ask you to talk about the whole question, the proposition, as an educator of knowledge. What is knowledge, and how do we share it? How do we build it?
first of all, applause to Yusuf for this broad description of the role of the public intellectual, and particularly in being able to talk across generation. There's one other dimension that I would add, and this is at least in partial response, Al, and that is that discussions ought to also be done in such a way that they can connect the broad general discussion, what's going on at the Air Force, at the Air Base in Kabul, or what's going on in terms of the debates in the Black Caucus, with what's going on
Here.
at the everyday level. Who's cleaning the neighborhood? Who's getting shot in the neighborhood? What's the connection there? When you take an issue such as the one that Brenda brought up about the implications of immigration, yes, there are serious immigration questions that are being raised by what do we do with our friends and allies coming out of Afghanistan, particularly at a time when the right wing in this country is virulent about the notion that the country is becoming too non-white. That discussion is connected to the fact that, for instance, we just had a report on the national census, and that national census report indicates that there are more people in this country today than ever, and at a growing rate, who identify themselves as multiracial. This is a country which is rapidly moving towards a position in which it is going to have to acknowledge and embrace the idea that we are a country of immigrants, and that we are a country, yes, that has had an original sin, but we've also had an original ideal. And that original ideal is that you can have a country that is not founded on territory and race. That you can actually have a country that is organized around the embrace of an idea.
Can I comment on that?
Good.
A lot of people don't realize that up until 1965, the immigration and naturalization laws in this country set a quota that said that 80% of the people who immigrated to the United States had to be classified as white, which means English, German, Irish, Swedish, European. And many people
Northern European, if you can get it.
Northern European. Many people in Eastern Europe were not considered white people at that point in time. It was only when white people saw themselves approaching minority status in this country that they began to include other groups that formerly had not been considered white. Now, what happened in 1965? We had the Voting Rights Act, we had the Civil Rights Act, and they made it possible for the Immigration Naturalization Reform Act that said we are going to open our doors on a proportional basis to people across the globe, not just to people in Northern Europe. Okay. And that's when we began to see Vietnamese and Asian and Somali and African and other immigrants come into the United States in increasing numbers. Okay. So it was on the backs of those in the civil rights movement that the immigration gates in this country were opened to the level that they are now. And I'm talking to you from the capital city in the state of Minnesota, St. Paul, Minnesota, which is one of 6 locations in this state where white people are in the minority, okay, because of the influence of people of color from around the globe into this community. And Minneapolis, Hennepin County is not far behind.
But one of the other things that was going on with that legislative movement that you were describing, the Voting Rights Act, the rewrites of
Lyndon Johnson. Yeah.
Yes, the rewrite of the immigration laws was a recognition that we have a problem in this country. Our population is growing older. We need more people. We are only going to be able to get those people through immigration. And what is interesting is that has not been at the top of the public discussion. It needs to be. We need more people. If we are going to continue to advance as a society, as a leader in the world, we need more people.
Yusuf, talk about being in St. Paul, the impact, so speaking to Brenda's question, the impact of immigration, that the influx of Afghan nationals represents. You're in a community, the Rondo neighborhood, which is the classic and historic Black community in St. Paul, that when my office was in St. Paul on University Avenue, I was located in a Vietnamese owned shopping center. I had a storefront inside of a mall. And I just remember how the immigrant Vietnamese community was settled in the heart of the Black community. And then that community itself has been supplanted by the more recently arrived Hmong community, who make every effort to distinguish themselves from the Vietnamese, right?
At one point, they were 85. At one point, they were 85% of the occupants of family public housing, which made it difficult for anybody else to try and get affordable housing.
And so, what is the impact of that immigration on historic and classic Black populations?
Well, let's start with education, because the St. Paul Public Schools, kids speak more than 126 different languages. Okay, so that's a draw on resources for English language learning, for special education, for all of those needs that low-income families or immigrant families bring. In terms of the African American community, the Jesse Jackson came here and dedicated a Black shopping center called Unidale on University and Dale, which is now a Southeast Asian shopping center. And University Avenue is primarily Southeast Asian. Payne Avenue on the east side is primarily Central South, Latin American, and Mexican. You know, I mean, we have the second largest concentration of the Hmong, who you mentioned earlier, in the United States. I think the largest one is in the Santa Barbara area of California. In Minneapolis, they refer to the largest public housing skyrise, Riverside, as Little Mogadishu for a reason, because it is now occupied. I think the largest number of residents there are Somali.
Correct.
And we have the largest concentration of Somalis in the Twin Cities anywhere outside of Somalia on the planet. So we've seen Southeast Asian, we've seen Central, South, and Latin American. Lake Street in Minneapolis, from Bloomington, a mile in either direction, is now primarily Spanish-speaking, businesses, okay, supported by the vast influx of people in the community from Mexico, Central, South, and Latin America. And this is in St. Paul, in the Black community, all of the fourplexes, the apartment buildings with 4 units, have been purchased by the Hmong community because they still practice the extended family model, where the grandparents live in 1 unit, the parents live in another unit, the kids live in 1 unit, and the other unit is reserved for relatives who are constantly coming in and out of town. And I mean, when somebody needs a new car, everybody in the clan donates $100, and the person has, $25,000, $30,000. And the Lutheran Church, in their infinite wisdom, recruited elders in the Hmong community. And wherever the elder goes, the members of the clan have to follow. Mm-hmm. So we have now a coalition of 9 clans who really rule this part of the country in terms of the Southeast Asian culture, politics, and population, okay? And they give their blessing to who is going to run for office, who's going to get elected, who's going to open a business, who's going to support who or what. And they have, the folks in the Nation of Islam used to say self and kind, self and kind. You know, I mean, they sold bean pies, went to your restaurant, and circulated the funds in a manner similar to what has happened in traditional Jewish communities. And these immigrants and refugees who have been welcomed in the Black community, because that's where the affordable housing has been historically, and they get an education, they get on their feet, and then they move out to the first tier of suburbs, okay? But they're still entrenched in the African-American community in terms of their businesses, their churches, their cultural attractions, and so on and so forth. We have a soccer festival in Como Park once a year that draws 60 to 75,000 people from all over the country, okay? So these folks are organized, they're together, and unfortunately, if you want to insult or offend some of our African brothers and sisters, all you have to do is refer to them as an African American. Oh no, brother. Oh no, brother. I'm Nigerian. I'm from Ghana. And I mean, in a minute, they'll separate themselves because of their education, because of their acculturation, okay, and because of the image of African Americans that's been distributed around the globe. And this is true for.
But increasingly, African Americans are also dissociating themselves from Africa. And you're hearing the term ADOS, African descendants of slavery. And so there's kind of, another
part of the reparations discussion.
Artificiality, I think.
Yeah.
Brunel, as
but this is the American way, what you've been describing, though. This is the American way.
Sure.
We are a heterogeneous society. And what all people, in this country need to recognize is that we represent as a nation lots of different styles of living. What makes us a nation, though, is that we are supposed to be committed to democratic ideals. And democratic ideals means that you make coalitions with different people. You work with them. You identify what is important to your people and to other people, and you make deals to advance those propositions. That's what America was at the beginning. It's where it is now. But we are in danger of, more so than at any time, I think, since the Civil War, we are endangered by a right wing that is armed, becoming better armed, and that is committed to doing away with the American experiment.
Mm-hmm. And that's the what I see is that that's the attack that they're doing with regard to voting rights.
Yes.
And not only with regard to voting rights, but with regard to this reapportionment. To me, that's one of the big issues that should be on the table for this year. Like in Georgia, Athens, Clark County is, has a huge Black population and minority population. And what the Georgia legislature has done in the past is divide that population up into 4 different districts.
Yes.
Which, decreases the voting strength. And so, when you look at South Africa, you don't have to be in the majority to control.
Mm-hmm. The two, Kamal, you make an excellent point. The two important words when we think about voting in this country are cracking and packing. Anytime you see that there are a group of people, and here we can broadly say a group of potential opponents to the Republican Party, figure out a way to either pack them in to one district or to divide them into many districts, either crack them or pack them. And that's what is going on in over 40 jurisdictions in this country. With this next election this next congressional election, a year and a half off, is going to be critical to what happens to African American people for the next 2 decades.
I think Kamal hit it on the head, though.
If we lose this battle, if Black people sit on their hands and simply disengage, what we are going to wake up to is a country that has been that has had its political system drawn in such a way that it will take us a decade to dig our way out of that hole.
I think Kamal hit it on the head, though, because there are 498 pieces of legislation that have been introduced in legislatures in 48 states intended to suppress voting. Okay, that coupled with, you referred to it as, I forget the term, Kamal, but in many states it's called redistricting. Mm-hmm. What they're doing with the census data to carve up state legislative districts and congressional districts based on population. Okay, and in many communities, the legislature has a majority of Republicans who are going to stack the committees that are responsible for drawing those boundaries for voting districts within their state. And that's where the damage is going to be done, between the suppression and between the redistricting, to try and help the people on the right. And they had a 30-year plan that was spelled out in a book called, I'm trying to remember the name of the woman who wrote it. It was called Democracy in Chains. And she talked about how the Republicans, beginning with Brown versus Board of Education, began to put a plan in shape across this country that has resulted in ALEC, the American Legislation Exchange Council. It's resulted in ACE, which is the Association of City and County Employees, which is a subset of ALEC. ALEC distributes right-wing legislation to every Republican state legislator in the country every other week. ACE distributes the same local information, how to change local laws and charters and statutes, to city and county employees who identify as conservatives. And these folks are serious as cancer about trying to maintain control. And Democracy in Chains outlined their plan to regain school boards, city councils, dog catchers, state legislatures, Congress, and the Supreme Court. And look what's happened.
Yeah.
Does
18 months.
Does the potential candidacy of Kamala Harris represent the vehicle to galvanize not only Black but progressive interest in resistance to and in order to defeat what is clearly a stated effort to destroy democracy as we know it from the right? What do you think? How do we, sort of going back to the beginning comment you made, look at the threat and find the possibility in organizing?
Well, it's a two-edged sword. Those on the left are hoping that the potential future success of Kamala Harris is going to be something that that we can work towards. But by the same token, those on the right are saying to their allies, "Here we go." They're trying to take over, and they are using her potential stepping forward as a signal that it is now time to do whatever is whatever can be done, including to engage in violence and to reject the notion of a country that is controlled by democratic norms.
It's also going to be driven by Biden's performance, because if Biden goes down in terms of popularity and accomplishments, that's going to be an additional hurdle that she's going to have to overcome, because people are going to want to know what she can or will do differently and what record she establishes within the Biden administration. Because look at her trip at the present time. Okay.
She was in Vietnam this week. But you are underscoring the point I was trying to make last week, that Harris needs to be in a position in which she is either running on the basis of a very, very strong a Biden record, or she needs to be disassociated from Biden if he has a weak record. And we, at this point, don't know what that record is going to be, but there are risks involved.
She also sent a lot of young black men up the river when she was the attorney general in the Bay and for the state of California. So she's going to have to overcome some of her own challenges, which existed in her race for the president.
Yeah,
I don't think that'll be a problem, though, Yusef. I think she can overcome that.
She's going to have to.
I know she's going to.
About purity. This is about survival.
Yeah.
And those of us on the left have got to understand this. There are no perfect people. Whoever is the candidate for the presidency is not going to be perfect. They're going to come with lots of baggage. But the question is, are you going to allow the perfect to become the enemy of the good?
But when Hillary ran, the question was, am I going to plug my nose and go in and vote for her, or am I going to stay home?
And
so
and what happened? A lot of
there is a degree of attraction attached to the candidates that determines how enthusiastic the voting public is, because our people stood in line for 10, 12 hours to vote for Barack Obama. And they did that in communities where there were attempts to shut down early voting centers and suppress the vote. But that enthusiasm has to be maintained and built up.
I think it's very important that these infrastructure bills get passed, both of them, because that's what she'll be able to run on.
Yeah.
If she puts money in people's pocket, if she gets jobs going, that's what she'll be able to run on.
And I would add to that the voting rights. We need voting rights legislation in order to protect the right of those people to go to the polls.
Right.
Absolutely.
Because no matter how enthusiastic they are about her, if we rig the system in such a way that voters are being suppressed and jurisdictions are being gerrymandered to assure that we have minority power in this country instead of democratic power, it won't do any good. But
those are my top of the mind concerns. What's happening right here in the U.S.?
Yeah,
those are my concerns.
Listen, guys,
I want to. Can I have 2 seconds to respond to the Obama election? I think that we cannot expect a repeat of the Obama election. Obama was a once in a lifetime circumstance, the first Black person to be elected president. That's not going to be the case going forward. Going forward, the question is going to be the question that usually is before us. Among people who are flawed, which of them nevertheless will allow African American people and people of color to advance in this nation? Which is going to allow us to achieve the ideal of the country?
With that, we end it. Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
wow.
Powell, Yusef Mtini, Kamal King, and Brenda Lau Gray. We'll see you all tomorrow at this time. I'm Al McFarlane. Take care.
Thank you, brother.
Great conversation, guys. Excellent.
Enjoyed it.
Hey,
I love Thursdays and Fridays.
Great host. Stay safe.
All right.
Bernil, I'm going to be calling you pretty soon.
Look forward to it, as always.
And tell Carolyn to keep on.
Shout out to Carolyn.
Right.
We know who wears the pants in that family. I send my regards, Kamal.
All right. I'm going to leave the studio.
Yeah, me
all
too.
right. Yeah, that's fine, guys.
All right. Be safe. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Yusef. Always.
Anytime.
Man.
Anytime, bro.
All right.
Peace.